about the issue of Yom Tov, 2 days Yom Tov, 1 day, 2 days, what's going on, a bit of background on this whole entire topic in Halacha, and then we'll talk a little bit practically as well. So kind of do a for various Yom Tov, and the Torah says we keep it there. In Yom Tov Sukkot, there's a day of Yom Tov. Then there are 6 days of Chol HaMoed. And then there's another day of Yom Tov called Shmini Atzeres. That's how the Torah says it. In Pesach, you have a day of Yom Tov, 5 days of Chol HaMoed, and another day of Yom Tov. Shavuos is just 1 day of Yom Tov. That's what the Torah says. And yet, in chutznikim, that's not how it's done. Instead, we have, for each day of Yom Tov, we have, instead of 1 day, 2 days of Yom Tov. So you'll have 2 days at the beginning of Sukkot, and 2 days Shmini Atzeres. They call it 1 day Shmini Atzeres, 1 day Simchas Torah. But it's really just Simchas Torah, just the second day of Shmini Atzeres. And for Pesach, you'll have 2 days at the beginning and 2 days at the end. And for Shavuos, you'll have 2 days instead of 1 day. Here in Eretz Yisrael, we do 1 day. What's the deal? Let's talk about the historical background, historical halakhic background on the issue of 2 days Yom Tov, which is not exactly what the Torah says. It says 1 day. Why would we keep 2 days in chutznikim? So it all goes back to the process of determining the Jewish calendar and determining Rosh Chodesh, which is how we figure out when Yom Tov is to begin with. So how does that work? How does that work today? We have a whole calendar, it's all laid out. But back in the day, how was it done? So there was a special payment that was appointed for this purpose. And it was not done with the entire Sanhedrin. They would just have a few judges that the Sanhedrin appointed, and they were in charge of this. And they would figure it out on a monthly basis. How would they figure it out? How would they decide whether to declare Rosh Chodesh or not? Very good. So Eidim would come and say whether they saw the new moon. So essentially as follows, the Jewish calendar the months are determined by the lunar cycle, the cycle of the moon. The problem is, the lunar cycle is approximately 29 and a half days. It's not exactly 29 and a half days, but it's approximately 29 and a half days. But you cannot have a month with a half a day. That doesn't make sense. You're going to start a new month in the middle of the day, so each month is either 29 days or 30 days. So, back in the day, when the basin was functioning in the full sense of the term, so then they would determine each month. Okay, is today the 30th day of the old month, or is it already Rosh Chodesh on the first day of the next month? Nachon? Good. So then, how would they communicate that to people? Telecommunications were not what they are today. What's that? They would have to send out messengers. The Mishnah described, Mishnah's Maseches Rosh Hashanah described that originally they had a great system of fire signals. And that was really quick. Then you could light fires on one mountain and they would see it from the next mountain, light fires there, and they'd see it from the next mountain, and then you could spread in one night. You could spread word all the way to Bavel, which is where most of the Jews lived, in Bavel. But then people started sabotaging that process. There are people who did not like this process, they did not like the way the basin functioned, they just wanted to cause trouble, whatever the case may be, different groups. And they would light fires when they didn't want it, they caused a battle. So they said it's going to have to be messengers. Messengers in the old days can only travel as fast as the horses can run. So it took time, they would travel time. And they wouldn't necessarily arrive at all communities to spread the word. By the time Yom Tov came, in Nisan, you have a maximum of 12 days of travel time before Pesach. Pesach is on the 15th of the month, and you can't travel on Shabbos. And for Tishrei, you have even less to get to Yom Kippur, or even to get to Sukkot, because you can't travel on Rosh Hashanah, you can't travel on Shabbos, you can't travel on Yom Kippur. So they wouldn't necessarily find out which day was determined to be Rosh Chodesh. They would know it was 1 of 2 days. So what would they do? They'd keep both days as Yom Tov. Yeah.
So why don't we do 2 days of Yom Kippur?
So very, very fair question. Benji asks, so let's talk about the old days when it was Usafik. They really didn't know. So what about 2 days of Yom Kippur? So firstly, 2 days of Yom Kippur is much tougher than 2 days of Sukkot. Right? I mean, it's a lot tougher. You're going to have people fasting for 2 straight days. So 99% of the time, Elul was only a 29-day month. It was 99% of the time it was only a 29-day month, not a 30-day month. And the Beis Din would try to make sure it was a 29-day month. And people would keep 1 day of Yom Kippur because it was so difficult to keep 2 days. And it could be dangerous for some people. So they would keep 1 day of Yom Kippur, but they'd still keep 2 days of Sukkot. The Gemara says a story that one time that Rava, the Amora Rava, used to actually fast for 2 days for Yom Kippur. He was mocking around himself, he fasted for 2 days. And one time it happened that really it was the second day. He was the only guy who fasted, and everybody else just assumed he wasn't really Yom Kippur. So that was a complication, yeah.
Isn't it just 10 days after Rosh Hashanah? So if you know what Rosh Hashanah is, you know what it is?
Yeah, but
you don't know which day it is.
they would not know by the time Yom Kippur arrived. There was some places were more than 7 days travel time away from the Beis Din. Okay, so in the old days they would have to do that. Now that's not our reality today. Our reality today is that we don't have a Beis Din sitting every month and determining when Rosh Chodesh is on the basis of witnesses coming to testify that they saw the new moon. We don't have a Beis Din that's capable of that. So, and they saw that was going to be the case. So, in the generations of the Amoraim, it's a discussion exactly when this happened. But this is done apparently by Rabbi Hillel Nesiah, a great-grandson of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and a great-great-great-grandson of Hillel HaZaken. So he had a Beis Din in Eretz Yisrael that was authorized to do this, and he realized that the community in Eretz Yisrael is persecution, and it's not going to continue. So he went ahead and said, okay, we also know the calculations. Even at the time of the Beis Din, they knew how to figure out when the moon would be visible. They knew how to figure out, and the Rambam has many problems where he describes in great detail mathematical calculations for how to figure out the length of the lunar cycle and when it will become visible, and it depends where you are and what time of night it will become visible. And their calculations were very good. Their calculations were down to within a few seconds. It was really amazing, even though they had a completely different understanding of how everything worked than we have today. So they understood everything circles the earth, the moon, the sun, everything circles the earth, and we have a completely different concept, but nonetheless, their calculations were amazing. So they knew how to calculate. So Hillel said, I'm hereby being Machlokes Harishon and Achron, how exactly this works. Some oversimplified, but it's okay. From here on, we're going to follow the calculations. I'm hereby investing authority in. I'm hereby being the Kaddish in advance. All the Rosh Chodeshes based on the calculations forever. That's how it's understood by some Rishonim. Okay, other Rishonim understand a little bit differently, but we have a system which is all worked out in advance. And now there's no suffering. Everybody in the whole world knows what day is Rosh Chodesh, what day is Rosh Hashanah. The Gemara says, nonetheless, they sent a message to the communities in Chutz La'aretz and said, "Gizoharu b'minhag avoseikem b'yadeihem." Keep observing the minhag of your forefathers. So in Chutz La'aretz ad hayom hazeh, we maintain the standard of what was observed in that time of 2 days Yom Tov, because who knows, maybe when the situation returns to what it used to be, so there'll be a need for it. So this was an institution. Midrabanan, second day, first day of each Yom Tov is Minat Torah, and the second day is Midrabanan. That was only imposed in Chutz La'aretz. In Eretz Yisrael, they always knew what day it was because they were able to travel to the different places in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, only 1 day was observed, the day that is required Minat Torah. Yes?
What about a lot?
It's a fair question. The question really is, does it go by distance or does it go by Eretz Yisrael? You may have places which are not part of Eretz Yisrael, which may be closer than some places that are in Eretz Yisrael. Halacha l'maisa, it goes by Eretz Yisrael. Why? But is a lot part of halachic Eretz Yisrael in different. At the end of the day, the minhag, it's a fair question. The minhag is that they only keep 1 day in a lot. I have heard of Gedolei Torah who are choshesh that they like should keep the second day Yom Tov. That is not the minhag. The minhag only when they like keep 1 day. Yes?
Isn't there a deal with like something about the walled cities?
I don't think about walled cities in this context, no. What does that have to do with walled cities? I don't know. But there is the following discussion, and this, you're right, the following discussion, which is, I'm not going to get to that. Okay, so let's talk about it now. Good. So how does this get applied to this madness? So what I said, communities in Eretz Yisrael keep 1 day Yom Tov, communities in Chutz keep 2 day Yom Tov. There's one exception in each direction. Rosh Hashanah we keep 2 days even in Eretz Yisrael. Yom Kippur we keep 1 day even in Chutz, but beyond that, 1 day in Eretz Yisrael, 2 days in Chutz. What happens if a person lives in one place and then he goes and visits the other location? Let's say, for the purposes of our discussion, that you might live in Chutz and you're visiting here in Eretz Yisrael. So what is the din? Does it go by where you are currently located, or does it go by where you generally live? Right? So there's a Gemara which says that in general, when a person visits a different location, he's really bound by the minhagim of the place where he lives permanently, and he also has to respect the minhagim and not flout the minhagim of the place where he is currently located. So some apply that standard to this discussion. They say the din of Yom Tov Sheni was imposed on Bnei Chutz La'aretz. Bnei Chutz La'aretz are people who live in Chutz La'aretz. If you're now visiting Eretz Yisrael, you're still bound by the minhagim of the communities of Chutz La'aretz, and you have to also respect the minhagim of Eretz Yisrael. So that would mean that, for the purpose of our discussion, one would be obligated, for Chutz La'aretz visiting Eretz Yisrael, you'd be obligated to keep 2 days Yom Tov. You would also be obligated to respect the minhagim of Eretz Yisrael. I'll give you an interesting application of that. So in Chutz La'aretz, there are different minhagim regarding wearing tefillin on Chol Hamoed. Where's tefillin on Chol Hamoed? Okay, where's that? Where's tefillin on Chol Hamoed? It's shifted over the years. It really has shifted over the years. Classically, the Sfardim do not wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed. Hasidim don't wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed. And regular Ashkenazim do wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed. That was the classic practice. But I think it's shifted over the years somehow. I'm not sure why. I have my suspicions why. But fewer people wear than used to. But in any event, that's in Chutz La'aretz. Everyone sort of does what they do in Chutz La'aretz. In Eretz Yisrael, the minhag is that people do not wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed. Why is that? Because the modern day population of Eretz, the Jewish community of Eretz Yisrael was established essentially by Sfardim, Hasidim, and Talmidim of the Gra. And the Gra held you don't wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed. So all those groups didn't wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed. Everyone else who came adopted that minhag. That became the standard. So if a person lives in Eretz Yisrael, so they are bound by minhagim of Eretz Yisrael. Personally, when I lived in Chutz La'aretz, my family's practice was to put on tefillin on Chol Hamoed. When I made Aliyah, now I'm in Ben Eretz Yisrael, but the minhagim really go by location, not by family. Only goes by family when there's no clear minhag of Muslim. So now I'm bound by the minhagim of Eretz Yisrael. Now I don't put on tefillin on Chol Hamoed. Let's say you're visiting Eretz Yisrael, but you're in Chutz La'aretz, and your minhag is to put on tefillin on Chol Hamoed. So you're bound by the minhagim of your location, and you should put on tefillin. But you're not supposed to flout the minhagim of the location where you are now. So therefore, you shouldn't wear tefillin in public. You should wear it private. You should put on tefillin in your room. Come daven in the base medrash. Come daven in shul without tefillin. That would be the recommendation. That's an application of the general principles that I'm talking about right now. You want to say something? Okay. So as applied to Yom Tov Sheni, according to this, yeah.
It's then these separate minions pulled out in 1 or 2 days.
So hold on. Where's everybody? Jump into the end. It's not. Okay. So when it comes to Yom Tov Sheni, according to this, then people who are visiting Eretz Yisrael, living Chutz La'aretz, they're bound by the minhag of Chutz La'aretz. They should keep Yom Tov Sheni, but they shouldn't flout the minhag of Eretz Yisrael. Maybe we shouldn't have minyanim for people who are keeping Yom Tov, because that's like flouting the minhag of Eretz Yisrael. So Yosef Karo, you may have heard the name. He's the author of Shulchan Aruch. He does not write about this in Shulchan Aruch, interestingly enough. It's a little bit of a lacuna in the Shulchan Aruch. But he has the Sefer of Shelos and Shulos. 10 extra credit points if you can tell me the name of the Virgin Kairos shoot. Sefer shooting. Right. Let's see. Shoot Avkas Rocha. It's on tip of your tongue, I saw. So the Avkas Rocha, he writes, the minute these people come visit Eretz Yisrael for Yom Tov, and they keep 2 days, and they even make minyanim. That would seem to be against the halacha, but he says it's okay. The Bnei Eretz Yisrael are mocha. We don't mind. We don't mind if they make minyanim, so it's okay. That's what he writes in the Shut Avkas Rocha. He does not talk about it, however, in Shulchan Aruch. Nonetheless, the Mishnah Berurah writes that this would be the halacha. You would keep 2 days. There are many places in Israel where they have second-day minyanim for people who are visiting. And this is the psak of many poskim. Yes?
What's considered a visiting and what's considered a living?
What's the definition of good? It's a very, very fair question. What's the definition of living? What's the definition of visiting? If anyone has personal questions about this, I'm happy to discuss with you on a personal level. But essentially, visiting is when you're going home back to Chutz La'aretz, but you're just here for a while. Okay? And living is when you have decided that this is now your home. And if you go back to Chutz La'aretz, it'll be for a visit. Okay? So, person makes Aliyah. Now he lives here. It doesn't go by officially making Aliyah. It doesn't matter if he made Aliyah or not. If a person's here to stay, he's here. Poskim sometimes talk about a person. Poskim have a case of a person who lives in 2 places. Let's say I have 2 houses. I have my Israel house. I have my Chutz La'aretz house. So do I live in 2 places? So poskim discuss, well, how much time are you spending here? How much time are you spending there? There could be a reality where a person spends half the year here, half the year there. He has a home here, he has a home there. He lives in both places. He'll be a Ben Eretz Yisrael when he's in Eretz Yisrael, and a Ben Chutz La'aretz when he's in Chutz La'aretz. In my opinion, a guy who is in the army, even if he hasn't made Aliyah, even if he's not sure that he's staying, but while he's here, he's a Ben Eretz Yisrael. That's already like, at the very least, it's like living here and living there. That's not a visitor. That's not something a visitor does. That's something that a person who was here. So I would say, if a good person in the army, at least while he's here, he's a Ben Eretz Yisrael. If he hasn't decided that he's staying, so then when he goes to Chutz La'aretz, he's a Ben Chutz La'aretz. He's living in both places. But a person who makes Aliyah, and then he goes visits his family for Yom Tov, but he's coming right back. So then he's a Ben Eretz Yisrael in Chutz La'aretz. A Ben Eretz Yisrael in Chutz La'aretz does not keep Yom Tov Sheni, but he's also not allowed to flout the local practice. So that means he's not allowed to do melacha on the second day. Even in private, he's not allowed to do melacha. Not allowed to do melacha on the second day. But it's not really Yom Tov. You won't make kiddush. You won't daven Yom Tov. You won't daven chol. You put on tefillin in private if it's a weekday. And okay, that's not a question that is l'maisa for you right now. Right now, what's relevant is the other direction. There were poskim who disagree with what I said until now. There's no phones out during shir. Put away the phone. Put away the phone. Put away the phone. It's Isser Negiah on phones during shir. So you can't touch it. You can't have it on your lap. Put it on the chair next to
The right side.
Okay. There were poskim who disagree with this approach. There were poskim who said the Gzeira of Yom Tov Sheni was not made on people who live in Chutz La'aretz. It was made on Chutz La'aretz. Alternatively, there's different ways you can say this. Of course, we do say it in different ways. I'm not going to get into the details right now, but alternatively, you could say the Gzeira was on people who live in Chutz La'aretz. But the Gzeira was to act minhag avoseichem b'yadeihem. Act like your forefathers would act. How would your forefathers have acted? No, they would have kept 2 days Yom Tov if they were in Chutz La'aretz. They would have kept 1 day Yom Tov if they were in Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, it all goes by where you are located right now. Where you're located right now determines whether you keep 1 day or 2 days. So therefore, even if you're just visiting, you'll keep 1 day. And this is not covered under the general rule that you follow the place where you are, and therefore even a visitor in Eretz Yisrael would keep 1 day. This is the psak of some poskim. Very famously, this is known as the shita of the Chacham Tzvi. Even though the Chacham Tzvi doesn't formulate it, I formulate it right now. There are other poskim held this way, Davi Nezer, and some other poskim. What's that?
The Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe.
The Lubavitcher Rebbe? I don't know.
You sure they did?
I don't think he fully held like the Chacham Tzvi, best of my knowledge, but I'll tell you what he did. So Lemaisa, how do we deal with this? I think, I'm not an expert about Rebbe's halachic opinions, but this is my understanding of what's on. Okay? So how does this come down? Halacha Lemaisa. Many poskim, including some of the great poskim that would generally follow the halacha, or Mishnah Berurah, or Moshe Feinstein, great poskim held straight up, like I said before. If you're a visitor, we normally keep at home. Visitor to Eretz Yisrael, we keep 2 days. That is the opinion of many poskim. Some poskim, there may be some who poskim straight up 1 day. Some poskim held, we're not going to hold 1 day, even though we think it's very, there's certainly is a big svara to say 1 day, but we're going to take it into account. It's called a snif la'akel, if there's other considerations. Like, for example, the question was asked before, what's the definition of someone who lives in Eretz Yisrael? So there were poskim who said, somebody who's not tied down in Chutz La'aretz, then just because he's here, and he's here for a considerable period of time, then we'll consider him like a Ben Eretz Yisrael. So many Sephardi poskim, including Rav Siev, said, we're going to hold 2 days. If you're coming with your family to visit Sukkot, you're keeping 2 days. But if you're a Yeshiva blocker and you're here for the year, then you're like a Ben Eretz Yisrael. Who knows? Maybe you'll stay. You'll decide to stay shut down, and you'll get a good shit in, and you'll just stay. So whatever the case may be. So they said, who said you go back? So you'll keep 1 day in that circumstance. I think that Sephardi guys have the right to rely on that sheet, but that's apparently what Ravadi, not just Ravadi, other Sephardi poskim would advise people. Supposedly, that is the minhag Chabad as well. So those who always follow in Chagim of Chabad, they can do that. There were some who made the following cheshbon. Okay, some do it, some frame it as like a chashash, a chumrah, and some frame it even seemingly as like a straight up psak and not a chashash. So there was a very famous Rav Yushalayim, Rav Shmuel Salant. Shmuel Salant is the first one I've seen quoted as coming up with this. Soloveitchik passing this way, but I don't think for the same reason. But they quote Reb Chaim Soloveitchik passing this way, Soloveitchik passing this way. I read Revival and see what's up in the Jewish source. They said a person who's visiting here will daven chol, but he won't say brachos there, he doesn't do brachos, won't say kiddush, but he won't do malacha either. So it's like, so people started calling it like half and half. They started calling it a day and a half. It's a little misleading. It doesn't mean that you keep Yom Tov for the first half of the day and you end at noon. It means it's like half and half. So some frame it as like a shash. Really, I think 1 day makes more sense. I don't want to go against the Mishnah Berurah and Moshe Feinstein, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Somebody say don't do malacha. But in terms of davening, then you have to pick a side. So then I'm going to say daven chol. Some say it differently. They go to the name of Chaim a little different. At least one say for myself, quote it differently. That to say it has condition to say Yom Tov, you can't say it. It can't be that in Eretz Yisrael there's no condition. It's not Yom Tov. But in terms of a person's personal obligations, so then a person is obligated by the minhagim of Chutz La'aretz. Minhagim of Chutz La'aretz don't make it Yom Tov, but they make it such that you're not allowed to do malacha. So that's the psak that some Rabbanim have, including some of the great Rabbanim of the community where I think that all of you probably come from. So the more, whatever you want to call it, modern centrist type of Orthodox community in America, the community that most of the Rabbanim are Talmidim Rav Soloveitchik. So his psak was that what I just said, that you're davening chol, like it's called moed, or for the last day like it's called, but you're not doing malach. So what goes on here in the yeshiva, and what do we advise? So firstly, the yeshiva doesn't enforce a particular policy, because some people come from families where their families have a policy, their families have been visiting for Yom Tov, they have the Rav that they ask their questions to, and that's totally fine. If your family has a particular issue that they follow, they do 2 days, they do 1 day, you can follow whatever it is that your family does. There generally is we are planning there will be a second day minion here for people who keep 2 days. There's also people who come visit and stay in the community, and they come to the second day minyan. There'll be a second day minyan both the first day Sukkot and for the last day Simchas Torah. Although, even if you're keeping 2 days, the base medrash, the minyan in the base medrash of the yeshiva is Eretz Yisrael minyan, and therefore Simchas Torah is on that first day. And we expect that everyone will join our minyan. Even if you're keeping 2 days, the first day you'll join our minyan for Simchas Torah, and then you can have another Simchas Torah, okay, on the second day. If your family keeps 1 day, for whatever. Let's say your family, you don't have a specific family practice. So then, what we would advise is the following. If you're Sephardi, if you're Chabad, and you literally keep all Chabad and Chagim, so 1 day. Otherwise, I think that it's reasonable for people, what I would advise for people is to keep the so-called, what I described as the day and a half. You're not doing Malach on the second day, you're dominating like it's 9 Yom Tov. You're not doing Malacha as though it is Yom Tov. Sometimes people have a hard time with that balancing act. But that's what I would advise. That's what my Rebbeim held, and I think many of the Rebbeim of the community where you guys come from. So that's what I would advise. If you have a personal situation where you think you're staying, and maybe you're in Eretz Yisrael or whatever, so then I'm happy to talk about that personally. Otherwise, that is my recommendation. Any questions? Yes.
Any benefit to someone only keeping 1 day?
It's a good question. It's a very good question. And this is a dispute amongst Posek. What I would say is like this. If you are a 2-dayer, you can benefit from malacha done by an actual Ben Eretz Yisrael. And you can even ask them to do stuff for you. But you cannot ask another Ben Chutz La'aretz to do malacha for you. You see what I'm saying? Because you all, they should be keeping 2 days. You should not ask another Ben Chutz La'aretz. In the dorm, I think people would keep 1 day, then they need to be sensitive to the 2-dayers. And not, I remember when I was in Yeshiva, so the second day was Shavuos. So I was in an Israeli yeshiva with an American program. So the second day was a regular day of yeshiva. So I remember at night some Israeli guy walked into our door, and my roommate was another American guy. He walked in and he turned on the light. He said, "Okay, now how are we supposed to sleep?" He can't turn off the light. He's like, "What are you talking about?" So people have to be okay. So he turned off the light, not people, but people in the dorm would have to be sensitive to the fact that there are different people doing different things. Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
You know what the Yaki Minhag?
What's that?
You know what the Yaki Minhag?
I don't know. I don't think there's a specific Yaki minhag on this particular issue. Yes, Rav.
Is there the Rabbi Allen told us that Sephardic really we don't need to do 2 days, right? Even if we don't like live here for life, we don't know that. But if my parents, like my family, does 2 days, and they're obligated to do 2 days, even though they're in like Montreal, am I obligated to do 2 days?
If your family is telling you should do 2 days, that's what we heard from our rabbis. So then do 2 days. Otherwise, if you're asking me, I agree with Rabbi Allen. I think there's a difference. You can ask your family to clarify this, okay? Because I think that many Sephardi poskim held that when families come visit, they have to keep 2 days. But if a guy is here in yeshiva for a year, then he keep 1 day.